Welcome to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom Show issue number 73.
Boom.
Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
Welcome, everybody, to the Steve and Cimino Says Boom Show issue 73, and we're back. And now, before I start throwing it at Steve, tell us what's going on, brother.
Yes. First and foremost, everyone, look below, click that subscribe button, and smash that bell so you get notifications when we go live, like we're doing right now, or we upload some awesome new episodes. And gentlemen, you know, I'm a professional guy. You know, I don't fanboy out. You know, I compose myself pretty well. But as you can see, I had to do a little redecorating for tonight's episode, and I'm pumped. He's one of my 3 living legends in the animation world, and to have him on, I'm pretty thrilled. But I'm not going to give it away. I want you guys to do the amazing intro, and then we're going to dive into our great guest tonight.
Absolutely. I was going to say something about that background shining off your head right there. It's looking good, all that stuff. That reminds me of the 90s. It reminds me of the 90s.
It reflects off the back. It's got a nice glow.
Awesome. Looks great. Now, Steve, our guest today, once again, he's in the Rick Hoberg category. What's that? What is the Rick Hoberg category? First off, I love Rick Hoberg, but he's a guy that sometimes somebody doesn't recognize the name or the body of work. But this guy's body of work has touched so many people, and sometimes they don't even know it. All of a sudden, it'll be like, oh, he did that? Because that happened to me many times, especially many episodes and many scenes, when I see this guy posting online and stuff, and I'm like, oh, he did do that. Oh my God. I remember getting into using some of the stuff that were in some of these episodes on the playground as proof. You see, that's what we would do. So Steve, Steve, as you know that, we bring in, I remember having Bring On the Bad Guys, bringing that in there, bringing in that to school, and and the kids making fun of me of the, I don't know if you remember that when they had the first Abomination versus the Hulk, and Abomination beats him in the first. Oh my God, that was hard to fight that in the playground. Those were hard. So tell me, you know those were hard to defend. So Steve loves that. So Steve, tell us what's going on today.
Well, each one of us has had guests so far where the geek zone gets so much that there's a layer of slathering that occurs. I've had it a couple of times now, of course, with Steve Englehart, Jerry Conway. I am interested to see how Niall holds himself together right now, because this, if there is any show, it is just delivered right into his lap. Since that Niall is I'd have to say king of, I would say 80s and 90s animation. Niall, I don't think there's a single series or cartoon that he hasn't seen. I just think it's just incredible. So
I'm a very lonely person.
Yeah. Now, again, the guest today, I was totally unaware of. I am going to be like a sponge. I'm going to be soaking all this new information in, because I've never heard of this gentleman, even though he does share my name, which is pretty incredible. Yes. We're talking about Mr. Larry Houston, and I'm Steve Houston. So, it's like, but we're not related. But it's going to be an exciting show, because throughout my years working in comic shops, many times I would come across people who were avid fans of the comic of the cartoon series, and they seemed to be at a level that was even more than the comic fans. I don't know how to explain it. And for those of us who've worked in the business, the main primer of all those comic fans that came in the 1990s has to be the animation series. They would come in, they've seen the animated, they would come into the comic shop. Oh, I love this, I love that. We owe a great debt of gratitude to all those people responsible for producing all that material. And today we are going to be talking with one of the prime movers.
And what's so interesting about Larry being such a good comic fan is he understood the continuity. Mm-hmm. And what that meant was, so you got to remember, those cartoons in the 90s started taking things to a different level. Sure, you had Spiderman and His Amazing Friends, and you had some other stuff, but, you know, they never really coexisted. They were always kind of self-contained. And then all of a sudden, all these cartoons started having little crossovers. Kind of remind me of what they later did in the MCU, you know, what they did in the theater stuff. So, I mean, this is a foundation of that. But I'll tell you something. The Fantastic Four in the 90s, Steve, the first season was okay. But when the second season came in, I remember a kid giving me a video cassette because I wasn't really watching cartoons at that time anyway.
Was it me?
Yeah, but Steve, I'm going to tell you, they were some of the best cartoons Marvel ever produced because they were so true to the comic books. And my friend, when he gave me a VHS, he's like, watch this. I'm telling you, this is unbelievable. And that was kind of unheard of, too. And Niall, I have to throw this to you, too. You're a little younger than me and Steve, so you were at the perfect age to soak this stuff in. You know, like you were at the.
I was 8 years old when it premiered.
Yeah, and it was so perfect. Well, but I'll tell you what I respected about. I'll tell you what I respected about the X-Men '90s stuff because I came into it a little later too. That once again, the continuity and how true it was to the comics. And like, you always saw things kind of change and all that stuff, but this was like consistent. And yes, they changed little stuff, but it was so well done. And you can tell fans were behind it. You don't get that anymore. But I wanted to say one more thing before we introduce the man on the show. The first time I met him, I knew about him, but the first time I met him, I think it was in Phoenix, and this guy comes walking with $1 million smile. You got to admit, he's got $1 million smile. And he said, he came and I said, oh, can I help you? He goes, oh, I just would like to pay my respects and say hello to Roy Thomas. And he came and he shook Roy's hand. I took a picture of them and I didn't quite know who he was until after. And I was like, that's a man that knew like where to go and show his respects for the industry, and he went right to the source. But I'm like, oh my God, it just showed you why these cartoons were unbelievable. So without any further ado, let's bring out the man, the myth, the legend, a guy who's touched millions of people with his work, which is absolute genius, Mr. Larry Houston.
Hi everyone, man, that's such a great intro.
No, Larry, I'm going to be honest with you. Like I said, it's like those cartoons, they were a different level than a lot of the other stuff. I mean, and it really showed that you knew what you were doing. Like it had a group of people that knew the Jack Kirby, the stuff, the Roy Thomas, the Stan Lee, the Steve Ditko. I mean, you could just say there was a reader. So before we get into the cartoons themselves, give us your origin. I'd love to know how little Larry Houston getting into the comic market. I want to see that. Educate us on your origin, sir.
Well, I can say I've been a comic book fan since I was in elementary school. And I had been buying DC and Marvel comic books way back when. But it wasn't until I started watching it was an anime show called Astro Boy. When I would come home from elementary school and watch that show, it just took my imagination. I just loved that show as a kid because it was a little small guy like me, and he was flying around and superhero stuff, and it was like that was great. So I've been a fanboy since I can't remember not being a fanboy. And so for me, taking the knowledge that I had all those years and putting it into a show, to me, it felt like, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to try and make the shows, an accurate representation of the source material. And for me, I when I first got out of high school, I didn't go into animation. I told my mom I wanted to be an artist. I want to go to New York. I want to work with John Buscema and Stan Lee and stuff like that. And she said, "That's nice, dear, but you got to get a real job." And so out of high school, I fixed computers for 7 years, and I did that. Yeah, I was fixing computers back in those days. But I had friends like Mark Veneer and such that were working at Hanna-Barbera and Disney and stuff. And they were telling me like it was a cyclical business that you get hired in January, fired in September, and then, it would repeat over and over again. So I left my computer job and I went they had job openings at Filmation in 1980.
Yeah.
And that's when I left computers and went into animation. I was a storyboard artist. And I did that at Filmation for about, I think, maybe a year and a half. And then Will Mineo told me about this new studio starting up, Marvel Productions. And so the guy that I went to go talk to was a guy named Art Vitello. He was doing the syndicated Spider-Man. So I went interview with him and he hired me, and I was working for Marvel Productions for like the next 9 years. It was excellent employment considering the business would hire you, fire you, hire you, fire you. This was like Marvel Production, 9 years of continuous employment. It was excellent. I loved it.
What you saying about your mom, like get a job and stuff? When you called her and said you're doing cartoons, what did she say? I'm sure that had been kind of surprising to her.
It was quite surprising, but the best thing I could show her was my first week's paycheck.
Yeah.
Always. Here's what they're paying me for 1 week of work. And she said that was it. She said, that's fine. Because then I was working in computers for like 7 years and I always had a paycheck. And so she always thought comic books, drawing, iffy. This is back in the 70s, you got to remember.
Yeah.
And so when I switched jobs and got into animation, she thought she was kind of, not happy about it, but I showed her the first paycheck and everything is fine. Said, okay, she didn't have to worry about me. She knew I was making money and I could take care of myself.
Yeah. Were you going to school while working on the computers, like going to animation, art school, anything of that nature, or what did you learn on the job?
I kind of self-taught and I kind of learned on the job. I've always been a storyteller. One of the things in high school, I met a bunch of like-minded artists, and we had an art class, and we all would make our own little comic books for our own benefit, our own fun. And so part of that is that I created my own portfolio of artwork and my own stuff I like to do. And what happened when I went to get the job at Filmation, it was for a job in layout. And so I took a test in layout and failed it twice. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to make it as an artist. But my portfolio was physically open. And at the time, it was the Herb Hazeltine. He saw my work I did in high school, that I was a storyteller. I wasn't really a guy who could really do really good anatomy. And he said, you know what? You might be better at storyboards. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, what the hell is a storyboard? But he took me upstairs. Don Christensen was in charge of storyboards. So I got an intro. He gave me a test and storyboard paper. So I took it home. And it didn't feel that hard. It was just telling the story. So I brought it back the next day. And I impressed him that I did it fast. And then he actually saw what I did. And what I didn't realize was that was a live script everybody on that second floor was working on. And so he liked what I did. He actually put what I did into the show, and I got hired the same day. And so that's an animation industry. And it's been, all continuous from that point forward. So
That
Yeah.
was Borny. Wow.
Yeah.
So what was the first cartoon that you worked on with Filmation?
Let's see. It was Filmation was doing a cartoon series for a country overseas, and I can't remember the country, but it was called Sport Billy.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember
Yes.
Sport Billy. Sport Billy and Sport Lily, right?
Yes,
I
that's
had
it.
the shirt. I had the T-shirt. I know cartoons, man. Come on, Steve.
And they they needed a lot of bodies, and I could do the work even though I was green. I knew how to tell a story, so I got hired, and that's how I got into the business.
Did you work on the commercial? Remember the Sport Lily and Sport Billy? Remember?
I remember the commercial. Yeah, no, I was doing episodes.
Okay.
But I saw it. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. See, Steve, we have so much in common, but I also, once again, watching the cartoons was such a great thing because you had the comics and you had the cartoon. So you could actually see the two different mediums working. Like you could see Spider-Man swinging, and then you could read a comic book, because I would literally, Larry, I'm telling you, I would have the comic right there with all the pages and watching the cartoons on Saturday, like at the same time. I was
my God.
it was crazy and all that stuff. Go ahead, Steve. Give Mr. Houston something.
Okay, so I don't want to, put a blanket statement out there that I never watched cartoons at all. I was young once. I just go back, I go back a little bit further because I grew up on Tom and Jerry, which is the finest cartoon that's ever been made. Nothing will ever get near.
Same here. I grew up on that. Yeah, I grew up on that too.
And then after that, I have of course, I was over in Africa for a long time and there was no TV. Okay, so I didn't see any. Right. I didn't see a lot of the cartoons. But then when I came back to England, I was watching Wacky Races and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I only have one memory of a Spider-Man episode, a Spider-Man cartoon, and it's absolutely ridiculous, but it's so brilliant that it's stuck in my brain. It must be now, over 40 years. There's an episode, I know you guys are going to know it immediately because you're the masters. There's an episode where like this snowman gets built or whatever it is, and then these electric wires go around it, and the snowman becomes alive. It doesn't make any sense, okay? But as a kid, I was like, wow, snowman, how did it gain intelligence with electricity? And then, I was just trying to work it out. But
right.
Needless to say, I did watch a couple of the early cartoons. I watched a little bit of He-Man. But in England, we got a lot of Tarzan. Remember the Tarzan cartoon?
Filmation too?
Yeah.
We got a lot of Tarzan.
Yeah.
We got and then of course we had Battle of the Planets.
Yeah.
Okay. Which used to drive me nuts, because it's just like, guys, get to the point of the story. I want to see the villain, and you never saw him. But again, it's just when we get to a certain point and we start getting comics and we start getting people, when I was working at retail, the amount of people who came into the comic store and said to me, the reason I'm into this is because of the cartoons. Okay, I came in here. Oh, I grew up with G.I. Joe. I grew up with Transformers. I grew up with this. It's a magnificent stepping stone into our world. And so basically, the way I thought about it, when I looked at a couple of cartoons, by the way, I still admit my favorite cartoon of the 1990s is the Batman animated series. It's the only cartoon I can watch where I'm like, whoa, okay, I can sit there and I can watch this. With other cartoons I couldn't watch. But that audience coming in gave me my career and gave a lot of people who are dealers and comic people, gave us our career, because that was a massive audience. And I think, again, it's a huge tip of the hat to people like you, Larry, that went in there, who are obviously original comic fans, said, okay, no, it's going to have to be done this way because that's the way I remember it. I'm going to try and do my best. And it came in, and then it comes back and gives dividends to people like us who are working behind the counter, working in comics. I just wanted to give you a tip of the hat for that, sir.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Larry, now I want to talk what we were talking prior to it. Okay, love Spider-Man and his amazing friends. I mean, that was such a huge, and some of the big things I loved about that was you got sometimes little guest appearances too. And like I remember like even in the costume shop, you would see like the Doctor Doom costume, like all those little things.
Yeah.
First off, were you part of that? Like putting those little things in the background?
I have to admit, I was the subversive one. I'm the one who added all of those additions into Spider-Man's Amazing Friends, and then later on into the X-Men. It's all me.
Yes, Steve. This is the stuff that I went bonkers from because it wasn't common. When you watched back in the 70s and stuff, you watched a superhero show. Like let's just say you watched Birdman. It was just Birdman. Like or you watch Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends after the syndicated one, the one that was before it.
Right.
All of a sudden, you got these little Easter eggs. And being a comic maniac, when you saw that, like the little costumes and all that, like Larry, oh my God. See, those little moments were the things that defined my life. Like 7 Little Superheroes. Steve, you watch that now, it was incredible. Captain America with the Submariner and Shauna the She-Devil. It was incredible. Okay. The one that I wanted to ask you about, and you told me about this, but was Swarm, the Swarm episode. Right. Now, that was a scary episode because I can remember watching that on Saturday, then going into grammar school the next day on that Monday, and we're all talking about it. I was like, "Did you see the Swarm?" And they were like, "Swarm." They were like, "It was a scary episode," but it had an impact on us. So tell me the origins of the Swarm episode on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Well, what happened was when we were just starting the series, they were trying to get premises through to the networks, and they were like rejecting a lot of premises for the first couple of episodes. And so Dennis Marks was the producer director of the show, and I kind of overheard what they were talking about, and I asked him, can I submit a springboard for an idea? And so I said, yeah, sure, because they can't get anything through anyway. So I sat down and thought about it, and because I knew Marvel stuff inside and out, I knew I wanted to create a story that would be specific to Spider-Man, and I needed something that wasn't generic. It had to be something like the clue to his success to beat the bad guy would be his radioactive blood, which no other character had. And then I remembered that John Byrne had created this character called Swarm that was out of bees. I think it was in Marvel Team Up or something like that.
No, it was the Champions.
Champions? Okay.
Yeah.
And I remember that, so I put together a premise of like you see a meteor from outer space and it hits near a beehive and creates them, and we go from that point forward. And the key to his victory is that he's immune. He's the only one immune to this guy. And so submitted it to the networks, and I was the first one. I had the first premise approved, and the second one approved was something of the Green Goblin. Oh yeah, there he is.
Oh.
Yeah.
But so Steve, what was so great about this is Swarm, when he shot people, they turned into like insects, and they all became under like these type of zombies. It was really, you were kind of pushing. Did you know you were pushing the boundaries on that one? Because it was really pretty like intense.
I guess it was, but at the time when I wrote it, I just wanted to have some fun with it. Have put the characters through their paces.
Niall, I love you.
Wow, you got that one from that's
okay.
Cool.
I got another episode to ask you about on Spider-Man Amazing Friends. I know I can stay on this forever, but I have to ask you 2 more. One, did you have anything to do with one of those last episodes when Peter Parker meets that alien that they fall in love, but he can't go into her? Remember, he can't go on her planet because of like his germs and all that stuff. But that was
I kind of remember that. It was called The Guardsman or something. I can't remember the title, but I do remember that episode.
Yeah, but the reason why I mentioned that, it was because it was so emotional. Like it really. you were really capturing the magic of like the comic books, because like you know, cartoons were usually all surface, and the Spider-Man 67 cartoon, which is one of my favorites of all time, it's all surface. But that was so deep, and like how he had to say goodbye to her, and remember that he gives her that kiss on the ship, and then he gets banished because they wouldn't. That was incredible. And I got to throw this at you, Larry. Steve, you ready? Only one Hulk. Hulk smash! Phony Hulk! Spidey Goes Hollywood. Steve.
Oh my God,
Hulk.
yeah.
Oh, when I saw the Hulk on this cartoon, because I didn't see the 66 animated stuff yet, but when I saw that was kind of like the Hulk's teaser, because I think the following season he was going to have his own season, but Mysterio he traps Spider-Man and his amazing friends in Hollywood, and he puts them on all these sets and he tries to kill them, but like one of them is a Hulk robot.
Right.
And some Polish guy, I don't know who's the voiceover of that Hulk, tell me about Spidey Goes Hollywood. I loved it. Hulk smash! Phony Hulk! I used to play that in my house. We're on Dumb Town, where everything fall down. Those are the lines. Tell me about that, Larry. Please.
Where did he go?
Oh, he's got to reset.
He's out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, back then, myself, Rick Holberg, Will Menio, we were all storyboard directors. We did the storyboards, Act 1, 2, and 3. So we weren't really in charge of it. But when we got our boards, we made sure to make it as close to the Marvel comic books as we could. And so we would ad lib or add stuff to try and increase the enjoyment factors for fans who would be enjoying the show. And I think the title card for that Spider-Man Goes Hollywood, where you see him sitting in a chair. Yeah, I drew that one. I drew that. I drew that title card.
It's so singed in my brain. I know it. And he has the horn. He has Steve, you're missing out. Steve, you're missing out.
Myself, Rick Holberg, we all drew a lot of the title cards that you see in the show.
Oh, Larry, I once again, go ahead now. I could talk Larry all day. Go ahead. I know you want one in here. Yeah. Oh, God, it's so good. I want to kiss you, Larry. It's so good.
I'm glad it.
He'll do it too.
He's a guy we did it for.
After this guy, really. Come on now.
So good.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea here, Steve, this is what he's talking about.
Yes.
Oh yeah. That's it. Yes, I drew that one.
Yeah. So one thing I have to give you kudos on, and this goes to John Semper Jr. And stuff like that as well, is what you guys did right with your shows. Because you've worked on G.I. Joe, you've worked on Captain Planet, X-Men. I mean, it goes Fantastic Four. I know you had a part with season 2. But what you guys did with keeping the continuity by respecting the source material. What you did that I have to say even the MCU wasn't capable of doing with their movies is you brought us into the comic shops. We got to know these characters. Yes. And when we went in for the comic books, it matched. Everything lined up, and the comics gave us more because obviously you have to condense things down for, 22 minutes of airplay or 24 minutes of airplay. But I have to say what you guys did, I'm getting goosebumps actually talking about it.
And he had to fight with censors. And he had to fight with the censors at the time.
But what he did, I mean, if you could capture that magic now, I think that could be a massive boost for the comic book industry itself. But again, what you guys did and brought that in, and they hold up today. I still watch X-Men. I still watch Spider-Man. I still watch Batman the Animated Series. And that's why I say my three top animators, right, is yourself. I know John is a writer and producer. And obviously Bruce Timm, what you guys did is it's standing up to the test of time. My kids are watching it at 5 years old. They're watching it. I mean, they don't get some of this stuff, but they're getting into it. It's bringing them into it. So I do want to say thank you for that. Because if it wasn't for your work in animation and what you did, it wouldn't have brought me to my love of comics. It wouldn't have brought me to what I'm doing today. And so I just want to say thank you for that.
Wait, now, before you go on, I just want to say, Larry, I'm sorry we're just throwing this all at you, but my daughter, too, we did the same things. When we got those all on DVD, when we got the whole X-Men, my daughter, I got her into it now when she was really young, and she wanted to constantly watch the next one. And then she got hurt. She got hurt when Morph died, and then when Morph came back, she loved. I'm just saying, Niall. I'm sorry to cut you off, but like my daughter has a lot. My relationship with my daughter is so much better too because of Larry. That some of that stuff. So go ahead, Niall. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. I mean, even these toys behind me. These were I bought two of everything. One to keep in the box and one to play with.
Take out.
Yeah,
Yes,
you know,
take
between
out.
8 and 12 years old or 10 years old, whatever it was. But you know, but they're still here. It's a part of who I am. And so what I want to talk to you about is, you know, you worked on Spider-Man, His Amazing Friend, stuff like that. But you got to work on another major franchise, which was G.I. Joe.
Right.
You know, tell me a bit about your partake in that series.
Well, when I first got on G.I. Joe, Don Jurwich was the supervising director, and I was doing storyboards on the series when it first started. I worked on the very I think it's the first two. We had 3 miniseries, and I worked on the first 2. And the first opening of the G.I. Joe miniseries, we see the Jets, the Shadow of the Jets, and they come into they come back to the base. Yeah, I did the opening for that. I opened the show for the very first miniseries. And I worked on, and what I did was I tried to pull, I was very influenced by anime at the time that was coming overseas. And so I tried to incorporate some of that into the show to make the show as exciting as I could. And so like the directors we were working with were more used to, you know, Tom and Jerry left and right, that kind of stuff. And so I had to try and convince the directors of what I was trying to do more volume animation and stuff like that. And it was a little tug of war because, you know, this is what they're used to doing, and I'm trying to push them to the next era of animation the way it should be. And so that's what I did on a lot of the early G.I. Joe shows, is try and push the envelope using anime techniques that I had been studying. And then one of the directors left the series, and Don knew that I wanted to be a director, so he asked me, "Do you want to direct on the G.I. Joe?" I said, "Yes." Yeah. And so from that point forward, in the mid '80s, that's what I got promoted to being a director, and from that point forward, I was directing everything from that point forward all the way until I retired. And so it was a learning experience, but I was able to pull a lot of my comic book background along with my cinema and trying to make all the G.I. Joe shows I worked on as spectacular and as interesting and fascinating, you know, as I could. And I got a chance to write one of the episodes too. On this one, it was called Hearts and Cannon. I got a chance to write one of the G.I. Joe episodes. So that was my second writing credit right now.
Oh,
well,
fantastic.
okay, I got to throw one at you. Fantastic Four. Now, the first season, did you have anything to do with the first season?
No.
Steve, I'm telling you, when they showed Galactus, he's about to eat something and he licks his lips with his tongue, and I'm like, this was so horrible.
Yeah, but it was not good.
And the animation was bad, but then all of the sudden, when you ever see like a second season, it was like the only season. I'm telling you, those were some of the greatest cartoons, because one of my favorite cartoons, probably of all time, the Hanna-Barbera, the Fantastic Four, the ones from the '60s. You know those, the ones, Saturday. Those ones that the based more or less on the Kirby and Stan Lee stuff. Loved those. But this, tell me, did you just see how crappy the first season was, and then you were like, tell me, how did you come into that, and why did you make it so glorious? Steve, I swear to God, if you watch these episodes, how many were they? How many were episodes?
13, I think. I think 13.
Incredible. He did the Blind Man's Alley, like the one when the Fantastic Four have to team up with Daredevil, and they're hang loose, heroes, when he hangs. Oh, it's so good. I'm sorry, Larry. Tell me the origins of season 2.
What happened was I was working on X-Men from season 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Marvel gave me a call that they weren't satisfied with season 1 of Fantastic Four, and they wanted me if I could take what I did with the X-Men and do it to the second season of Fantastic Four. And so I asked for 3 conditions. I said, okay, one, obviously give me some more money, and they agreed to that.
Yeah.
The second is I want to do the classic Fantastic Four stories, that have not been touched upon. And the third I asked them to do was like, leave me alone. I want to do the original stuff, and I don't want to be supervised. And they agreed to all 3. And so when they did that, that's when I agreed to leave the X-Men to go to the Fantastic Four. And then my assistant director, Frank Squilacci, took over season 5 of the X-Men, and I went to the Fantastic Four. And so when I got there, we worked with the writers and with my producer, and we went through all the old classic stories, and that's how we did, a 5-part Inhumans. We did Daredevil. We did the first animated Black Panther episode.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to go after the classic stories, like when Sue and Jonny meet their father on a distant soil in the Scree. Can't talk right now, but you know the story I'm talking about.
Of course.
Yeah, so I wanted to make sure to do all the classic stories that hadn't been touched, and to do it right.
Steve, they did Fantastic Four 112, that Hulk versus the Thing, and you even incorporated that obelisk thing that they fight in the park. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then in 112, and then the kid goes, he did it so well, and the Thing was the Thing. Larry Houston is the living embodiment of like when somebody that knows the stuff and that is a fan of the stuff that does the work, you get the quality of what everybody that is you don't even get that in the comic books anymore. But Larry, I'm telling you, I mean, you are such a part of my childhood and my daughter's childhood, Niall's childhood, but in such a beautiful way, because not just that they were good cartoons, but they were, they touched my soul because they were so true to the comics. And when you saw those little things when they fight, the Thing was the Thing. Like the way he talked, it reminded me of everything. Like I'm telling you, Larry, that was such an unbelievable. So you were basically directed and took care of every episode of those Fantastic Four?
Yeah, for that season, yeah. And I made sure to have my art department take like certain Kirby. I would take scenes out of the comic book and put it into the show.
Yes.
Like there's a scene where Thing is holding up this gigantic piece of machinery that's straight out of the Kirby book, and I made sure to put that into the show. We did the Sinister Sentry, and I took certain panels from the comic book and made that into the show. And I tried to make sure it was costume accurate, so it looked like the original comic book with all the dark shadows and the Joe Sinnott lines and everything.
Yes. Oh my God! And like when
So Larry, a quick question for you. Now, obviously, what you're referencing here is, it's Deep Stan and Jack.
Yes.
Now, does that mean that your peak reading time when you were reading comics, what era are we talking about where you were going to the stand, picking up a book and just going, oh my God, this is the be all and end all? What era are we talking about, and how long did that last?
Well, I guess it shows how old I am. I used to pick up my comic books in the 60s, okay? Way back when at the spinner racks, I would go into the drugstore and pick up a comic book. And a lot of the classic FF books from 44 on were on the spinner racks. I pick it up and read it going, oh my God, what the hell is this Galactus? Oh my, that's how I started with Marvel stuff and went forward. But yeah, that was my background starts in the 60s and then the 70s, and then from that point forward. But I was a fan of comic books, and so if it had, I also was a fan of like certain artists like Jack Kirby, John Buscema, Gil Kane, Gene Colan, and I would just really read their books, absorb what they're doing, the dynamics of what the storytelling and the writing. I mean, the writing of Stan Lee and Roy Thomas and others, Jerry Conway. I mean, it just pulled me in to the fantasy and the escapism that was there.
And I have to throw this in there too, the respect. I remember being young, and before, news wasn't you didn't hear a lot of stuff that was coming out of the comic industry and all that stuff. I mean, like when you're young, you just pick up a comic book. But I remember watching the X-Men, and then when Jack Kirby died, you guys dedicated that episode, like you said, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, Jack died. And that was so that was. I mean, I found out about it.
I told him to do that. That was me. I called up the network and said we got to dedicate a card at the end of the episode for Jack Kirby, and we put him into. There's a Mojo Vision episode where we do a pan shot of all these aliens, and Jack is right dead center.
Yes,
in the pan shot.
Yes,
and the thing was, the week after that was on the air was the week he died the next week. So I remember that vividly. So we made sure to put that card onto the next episode.
Oh, that's where I saw that information. Unbelievable how much that touched me too, because then I saw it in the paper later. He had a little write up, but I learned about it there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I do have to throw this. Okay, this was another schoolyard thing. We always had Juggernaut and the Hulk and who's stronger, but when you had Gladiator beat up Juggernaut was one of the greatest moments of my life. Niall, look at this.
Yeah.
I love that. Who's taking orders from Bad Hair Day? And then he punches him. Remember because he has the mohawk, and then he punches him, and then he grabs his hand.
Yep. None of that was in the script. None of that was in the script. I made it all up.
Oh my God.
We see him coming down from space like this, and then I introduce, he lands.
Wait, Larry, hold on. Let me tell Steve. Steve, his introduction, what he's saying right now, I was a Gladiator freak. You never saw him in a cartoon before. And all of a sudden, they're waiting for somebody, and you hear the wind, and you just see these hands from the perspective of the hands. And I'm like, I get off the couch, Larry. I'm like, Gladiator, he's coming. And then he comes. But the perspective, now, please, talk about making that perspective. The anticipation was numbing. Go.
Okay, yeah, no, I wanted to do, the script just had a thunderclap and he appeared. I went, no, we can't do that. So I went ahead and storyboarded this character's coming. It's Superman coming from outer space.
Right.
And I knew there are little anime tricks I use for this when he's going through the coming closer to the castle. I'd have clouds come up and wipe us closer and closer. And when he lands, I made it a big event. So you see him landing, and then you pan up his body like this, Gladiator. So this was like an important character.
Yes.
And when the writers wrote him going after Gladiator, there was no confrontation there. And so I knew as a fanboy,
yes,
I wanted to see Juggernaut versus Superman. So I drew that punch where he punches him and nothing happens. And then Juggernaut gets picked up by his arm and thrown over the horizon.
Yes. Yeah. Steve, wait, Niall, give me the big head. I gotta do this for Larry. Because when he sees Gladiator, Juggernaut looks and he goes, "Why are we listening to Bad Hair Day?" and then he punches him, and then Gladiator takes him and throws him across the horizon.
Yes.
That was so good, Larry. Oh my God. Okay, now go ahead.
That was my fanboy. Yeah, that's coming from me as a fanboy, knowing I knew everything about the Imperial Guard. I knew the X-Men, and so I knew that would be a moment that it was needed, and it made me feel good to draw that. And I was able to, I think, the following season when we brought Juggernaut back, I picked up on him still flying through the air, landing in the middle of the Atlantic, and he had to walk all the way back to New York. It took a whole season.
And he had a little guest appearance on Spiderman. You see him coming out of the water, right? You saw the hands, right?
Yeah, I tied them together. Yeah, but every step he took to go talk to Xavier, he was getting more and more pissed. And the thing is that when the writers gave me that script, they didn't explain why is he angry? It's just he's angry. So no, I wanted to give it a reason, and it's because he got his ass tossed into that
He crushed
into
his
the ocean.
ego.
Yeah, and now he had to walk back because it can't fly, so he had to walk the entire Atlantic Ocean to get back to New York.
Yeah.
But Steve, this was so incredible because once again, it was so tied to the comics. You never saw cartoons like this. And it was so, like I said, how they appeared in other episodes and the continuity was Larry, you and Rick Hoberg. It's time, it's time to come back, and you are coming back, so we can talk about that. But Niall, I'm sure you have something to say.
Yeah. So first, though, I just want to we got 2 super chats here. One from Zaid Comics. Phil Diaz, my brother. Thanks for the $5 super chat. He's an amazing creator. Larry, I used to watch X-Men as a kid with my dad. A big reason I write my own comics today. Thank you for all of your work. Gambit's my boy.
Cool.
And then we got Aaron Sleeper, $1.99. Thank you, sir. Seriously, Rogan the X-Men show. Such a babe.
Calm down.
Wait,
Calm down.
let me give props to those guys. One of the great lines by Gambit in those episodes when he jumps in the car with Rogue and they're driving off and she's like, "Do you want me to put you in the hospital?" Because he's always trying to kiss her, and he says this line, Rogue. He goes, "Cher, you can drain my energy anytime. Because Gambit's got plenty."
I know. We were surprised we got that line through because it had so many implications to it.
Yeah.
But it got through, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
They didn't stop us.
And those were the lines you always remembered. "I don't care who did what to which wedding." Remember he would just when he's like, it's just so many lines. Even my daughter would talk to me. She would say she was sitting in the car seat and then she would say that. She would say those lines. It was incredible. You had such, go ahead now. I'm sorry.
All right. So now I know too, I was going to actually get into this, but I think we should start jumping into some of, how you got into the X-Men and everything. But I did, I was going to talk about some Captain Planet, but let's get into, I do want to find out how the whole X-Men thing came to be, where now you're working on, such a major property, especially with Jim Lee's series, and Chris Claremont, what they were doing, then bringing this to the screen. And it just blew away. And that pilot episode, the 2-part pilot episode, we were introduced to Morph, a character that, essentially was created for the show, but was modeled after another character. But what were your thoughts when this came to your table, to your drawing table?
You mean the
whole series? The series.
Oh, the whole series.
Yeah.
Well, back then, you got to remember we had a 13 episode pickup with no guarantee of a season 2. So working with the writers, Eric Lewald and his wife Julia, they knew when they got assigned the show, they knew zero about the X-Men. I knew too much that the X-Men were about. So I was able to educate them and bring them up to speed about the relationships and who did this and who did that. And so they were able to write good character dramas. And I was able to make sure that the scripts I was working on didn't go out and do something stupid like and when it's something like that happened, I read it and like I think I remember reading that a writer wrote that storm flies up in the sky and spins to create a tornado or something. And I just took my pen, I scratched it out. And then I wrote how she should do it, and then that's how it happened. And so I caught a lot of mistakes. I basically say I course corrected a lot of the writing or the artwork to make sure that it was stayed within the mythology of the books back then. But myself, Rick Hoberg, Will Minio, we're 3 fanboys. We got into the Marvel production, and our 2 bosses was Stan Lee and Margaret Lesh. And Margaret believed in the show of the X-Men, and so she found the money, and Will set up the relationship with the Japanese studio for us to do that first Pride of the X-Men episode. And so we did our best storyboards, and I still got mine, and we got excellent animation when it came back. And but the zeitgeist was wrong. I mean, we put the show out there. because there was only 3 networks: CBS, NBC, ABC, and they didn't understand what's an X-Men. Why do they fight each other? What is this all about? It was none of the networks picked up on it, so it kind of like that's why it was only one of it. And and we had to compromise with the people with the money, because they said, "Hey, look, Crocodile Dundee is a popular show. Why don't you make Wolverine Australian?" And we all kind of freaked out when we heard that. But we said, "Okay, look, it's a pilot. If we can get it, so we'll switch it back." And so that's where that came from, because it was a compromise. Now, fast forward about.
You're talking about the pilot episode, right? That
That's
X-Men
the
pilot.
Pride of the X-Men one where they just did
Pride
the
of the
one
X-Men one.
episode. Cyclops had the full head covering and everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we based all of that artwork based upon, at that time, it was Dave Cockrum, I believe, was the artist in charge. So we based our artwork on him. Fast forward about 6 years later, my boss, Margaret, became the CEO of Fox Kids. And so she's the one who called me, called Will, Rick, and Eric and Julia, and said, "Look, we're doing the X-Men." She had the power to greenlight the show. And so she's the one who got it on the air for us to do the show. I mean, she greenlit X-Men, she greenlit Batman, she greenlit Spiderman, she greenlit all of that stuff on Fox. It was because of her. She's Saturday morning secret superhero, because she did so much and nobody knew anything about it. Now, and so when our Eric and Julia were writing, I was working with them, and I think that his writing partner was either Mark. I might have gotten the name wrong, but Mark Edens. But anyway, they would plot out the whole 13-episode arc. And so I would work with them, and they showed me where they were going to go, so I could figure out how to direct all the episodes together. And so this was one of the few productions I've worked on where me as an artist and him and them as a writer, we're all on the same page. And physically, I could go talk to them. We were like interactive. And so we were able to do character dramas and do it accurately to what the books were. So that's one of the few productions I worked on where that was possible. I mean, I've only had maybe 2 other episodes, like Johnny Quest, where I was, working in sync with the writers and stuff. And so when we were, the original stories that were done back had the character Thundarr dying. And so, but we're going to create the first Native American character in one episode and kill him. It was not a good idea. So they asked me, is there another character that died? And I said, yeah, that was on back. It was drawn by Neil Adams, issue 48, 47, somewhere back there, that it was created to be killed. And it was a character called Changeling. And so,
Roy and Neil Adams made that character. Yeah,
yep.
That's Roy.
Yep. And so we pulled that character, and we tried to talk. Look, his name is Changeling. But even though Teen Titans had the Changeling, you guys did it first. But Marvel lawyers said, no, we don't want to bother. Find another name. And so we came up with Morph. That's where it came from. And so Morph, which was Changeling, became the character that died. And believe me, that was a hard thing. We had to get the censor person to agree to it, because we're talking Saturday morning and killing a character. And she went for it, but she said, as long as we don't use the word kill, death, certain words we couldn't use, and so we went for it. And we wanted to make sure that the kids, when they saw the X-Men, this was not Scooby-Doo, this was not Super Friends. We're trying to do something new here. And so that's how we got the script through. And the one lucky thing we had also, because I call our series like lightning in a bottle. We had so many things going right.
Yes.
Our censor lady came from live action. She wasn't a Saturday morning person, working on Smurfs and stuff like that. She actually understood human drama and all that stuff. And so she allowed us to push the envelope. And it just worked out great, because we were able to do a lot of stories that were not being done in Saturday morning at the time. And we were trying to write, instead of writing here, we wanted to write above kid level. Don't write down, write up, know. And I think that helped with the reruns and people seeing the stories, because we were writing for teenagers. And it
did make an impact, because I remember seeing an article in the paper, in the Sunday paper in Boston. and they were talking about the Fox X-Men, like this isn't kid stuff, and they talked about Morph dying, and
Right.
it was getting such great press, and that was so unheard of at the time too, because you got to see when I'm opening up a paper and I'm like, Wolverine, what are they talking about here? The cartoon, like that was something you didn't see. I mean, it was so rare for that kind of stuff to take like making the paper. Nobody cared about cartoons and superheroes. But and I remember seeing that they were talking. It was, and another line by Magneto. Remember at the end of that season, the brave are always the first to die. Remember that?
I made that up.
Oh,
I got that.
Oh, and what about this one? And what about this one on Pride of the X-Men? Now, give me the big head. This is for Larry.
There you go.
Oh,
wait,
I see him.
Wait, you've gone far enough, but now you go no further.
I remember that.
Yes.
That's our juggernaut.
Yeah, but plus the perspective, though, when he says it, you showed his chest, like how it came to his chest, and then he goes, now you go no further. That stuff, Larry, I don't know. You're like the Santa Claus of cartoons.
It's funny you mention that, because that's where my section of the storyboard begins. It's exactly where you just said that. I go from that point to the end of the show. I did that part. Will Mineo did the beginning to about beginning of Act 2. Rick Holberg did Act 2 to the end of what you just said, and I picked it up from that to the end of the show.
Oh my God!
I gotta say, man, and when it premiered, because I remember me and my neighbor Marcus, right? We're next door neighbors. We're like best friends. We had a sleepover Friday night, so that because we got the Fox Kids magazine, right? And we knew X-Men was coming, and we were huge X-Men fans. We had a sleepover. We watched that first episode, right? We did that, and then it was like, oh, it's a two-parter, right? So then we had another sleepover the next weekend. And when Morph died, man, we were like, what the fuck? Like, we were like, this is insane. And we were hooked, dude. And another thing I got to say with this series that you guys did is, and I hadn't read it in comic form, but the Phoenix Saga. I mean, the way you guys adapted that, I mean, that was like a soap opera to us. Like,
it was so good.
Wait for that, just playing that out. I mean, that was unbelievable how you guys adapted that to animation. I mean, kudos to you guys. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. We benefited from the writing team, that they all understood we had to do an accurate portrayal from the comic books to the TV show. And I would, back then, there was no internet, so I physically brought my books into work, and I would Xerox pages to hand off to the artist saying, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do the show. Mm-hmm. And I had to follow what was in the books. That was part of my, because I was the producer director, I was the art director, and I made sure the continuity was there.
Did you have any partake in the voice acting? Because I mean, the voice acting in the whole series is just it's crippling.
In the beginning, like when we did the first casting, way back when the series first started, the voice director was directing it like Scooby-Doo, and we all when we heard it, we all freaked out, and they actually flew me to Toronto to undo his mistakes so that we could get a show that the actors were acting in the show. So there was a cartoony version that we just, deep sixed, and we got the actors to actually act. And a lot of the actors that we got were stage act. People who worked on stage. They didn't do cartoon voices. And we tried to get them to do the voice within their own register, so that they had a place to go when they had to go angry or sad like that. But that's how I was involved with the beginning, the picking of all the voice actors. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. I want to ask you this though, Larry, like, when, now that it's coming, obviously the legend of those X-Men cartoons never went away. People love the theme and all that stuff too. It was great. Yeah. And people remember that, and it has such a good hook on it. Now,
I drew that.
You did the whole opening. Yeah.
I drew the opening. Yeah.
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 What
Genius.
didn't you do, Larry? All of a sudden he'd stand. All of
I
a sudden he'd stand. Steve, I hate to say it, Steve. You don't. I know you always had a little tough over there and over the Steeds over there. But this was like incredible because once again, you never got to see that depth of that. Like these are the comic books coming to life. This is what everybody wanted to see. But now, Larry, let's talk about the
It
X-Men
wasn't
now.
Tintin. It wasn't Tintin, Steve.
Yeah. Talk about.
Hey, we had Asterix as a cartoon.
Yes. I remember seeing the artwork.
Very beautiful artwork, right?
Oh, excellent. Beautiful, yes. Oh, yeah.
It was incredible. But let's talk about the X-Men now of today. Like, I mean, now it looks like we're
97.
coming back. What is your role in all this? Hopefully, you're hopefully the same as it was. But tell us how it all came to fruition. Now coming back, the X-Men '90s cartoon. Wow.
Well, the original, the new team taking over, who are doing the X-Men '97, they contacted me. They contacted Eric and Julia Lewall, and they brought us in as consultants on the scripts and on the artwork. And so that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years, kind of telling them, our input, and also we give our 2 cents on the scripts, and we advise them. But what I tell people is that we advise them, but they have to remember, we don't have the keys to the car. We advise them. They're going to drive the car and do the stories they want to do, but we would tell them exactly what we felt it should go, this way, that way, left, right, that kind of stuff. So that's our involvement. We're like the initial audience to the finished product. And I can tell you one thing, that all the people involved that I dealt with, that Eric's dealt with, they're all fanboys. They all love the stuff. And they can quote it just like John. They can quote episodes and lines and everything, because they were all fans of the show.
Okay, now I've been giving you crazy praise. Let me give you a little. I got to attack you on this one. The one thing I couldn't stand, and obviously you had to deal with the censors, was Wolverine always showing the claws. That was always a big thing. But his greatest move in the entire cartoon that drove me nuts. Even my daughter realized this. He talks tough. He shows his claws. He jumps. He basically jumps on their back and he gets thrown off. That was usually his favorite move. They would take him and throw him off. And It happened a million times. Obviously, you couldn't have him stabbed.
Right.
Poor Wolverine. He got the short end of the stick. He was always. Tell me about that. What was going on?
He was a fan favorite.
He was, but it was.
Yep.
It just like, there he is, jumping on, getting thrown off. Even like thugs could do it. It drove me crazy. Tell me about that with the battling the senses.
Well, basically, it's Saturday morning. We could only go so far, and so basically, when he got into a tussle with someone, it's kind of more wrestling than stabbing and attacking the way he would in a comic book. And so it was a lot of. I had to create scenes that it looked like it was like a lot of action going on, but it was like it wasn't, because I couldn't have him do what he normally does. But also because we that's actually another reason why we needed the Sentinels, because with the Sentinels he could cut loose because it's a robot, and the sensors didn't come after us. But when he was going after a real person, we had to be creative on what he did with the claws, and we just had to be creative. I had to be creative to make it look exciting, but he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Or if he did something, maybe the claws aren't there and he just punches people. He's not trying to eviscerate them and stuff like that. So it was a compromise,
Right. Niall, check this out. You got to think of my daughter, like 5 years old. I'm making her a sandwich. Dad, Wolverine got thrown off again. Like, she's like, is he ever going to hit it? Is he ever going to stab it? No. He got thrown off again. I'm like, I know, Bryn. He can't
stab anybody. I mean, there was a fight sequence between Wolverine and X-Force, and he was fighting somebody that could multiply. And so in that sequence, I just had him punch people. He just started fighting and punching because he couldn't stab, so he could just be like that. But that's
if you think about it, though, Wolverine with these adamantium claws, that's the worst thing to work for. I mean, they look so cool, but I'm just saying the worst thing to work with, right? I mean, like, you can't. It's just it's so hard to make that work.
Yes. Now the
It
one thing about, what I can't talk about it directly, but I can tell you that X-Men 95 is not being written for my Saturday morning. So they have more flexibility than I have. I'll put it that way.
Good. Die, 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 die.
Now
Yeah.
Okay, go.
with the new season starting, or the series kind of continuing, because it's going to pick up where
Right.
the last episode ended. I've
Oh,
seen
it
it
is?
a lot.
That's how- that's
It's picking right
Yeah.
up. They're picking right
Oh,
up with it. So you guys come in, right? You're the trusted advisors. You're the consultants, going over everything they're doing, making sure that it's canon to the stuff you guys did.
Right.
I have seen on social media a lot of fans like myself are concerned because a lot of things when they get rebooted, it's never the same magic for us. With how media is and things like that, how they change characters and stuff. Do you, if you're able to even answer this question, you might not because the series, the series hasn't premiered yet.
Right.
But
Yeah.
do you have any concerns with the reboot of this series, or are you pretty confident they got it right?
I'm very confident they got it right, and they
Ooh.
added other characters, new characters to the series. So they're
Mhm.
picking up where we left off, and the characters are still consistent to what we did. Now the stories are going to be their original stories that they're doing, but they're also picking up on stories that existed after. We went to 1997, so there's a ton of stories between 1997 and 2024,
Yeah.
and so they've got all of that to play with, in their stories.
So have they done the same in spirit to what you and your team did by really looking at a lot of the source material, respecting the source material?
Yeah,
Or are they doing a lot of original stories?
well, it's both. I mean, they're doing
Okay.
original stuff, but they're also referencing and going back to the source material, the stories that are there. So it's a blending. Some episodes have a lot, some of it is original. So it's a blending of the two.
Yeah.
That's what
And
I
then
can say.
the animation style. Again, I
Oh,
don't know if you are we looking
oh
at
God.
something similar? Like in the
It's very,
style that they animated it?
oh, I tell you, I told the director I'm jealous because he's doing his X-Men with Disney money. I didn't have Disney money. Okay. When
Yeah.
I did my show, I had Korean money. And so I had to try and make stuff from Korea look like way better than the budget I had. I had basically, when I was doing the X-Men, I had half the budget of Batman. Batman looks gorgeous. But they had, double my budget. And so I had to try and make the X-Men look good, and not move a lot. So it's kind of, for me, that approach came from when I was in the 60s watching Johnny Quest, the original one with Doug
Oh,
Wildey.
Yeah.
And
so
he would
good.
have stuff where stuff looked gorgeous, but it didn't move, but it didn't matter because you're looking at it going, man, that looks so good.
Oh,
And so I had to use that technique into the X-Men where I had to make shots look really good, even though nothing moved, but it looked cool to look at.
Yeah.
And I did that throughout the whole series to try and, make it look more like there's more there than you actually see.
Yeah.
And
Did you
there's
say Johnny Quest? Did you say
yep,
Johnny Quest?
the original ones in the 60s, yeah.
But you
No,
had a hand in some Johnny Quest too, right?
yeah.
yeah.
When I was
Yeah.
at Hanna-Barbera in the late 90s, we did a reboot of and we called it The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest. And so I was one of the directors, one of four directors that was working on the show. And that's the other one where I could work directly with the writers. And we basically plotted out the entire season together. And that's like, it was the X-Men and Johnny Quest. Those are the two series that I was in sync with all the creative people there.
Mhm. Very cool.
And Larry, you had a hand in Thundarr the Barbarian, a notorious
Yes.
cartoon. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, that was really fun because I was working in the daytime at Marvel Productions on either G.I. Joe, Transformers, Spiderman, and Amazing Man, Hulk, and then at nighttime I would go over to Ruby Spears and pick up freelance boards on Thundarr, and so it was like great because you'd walk in the door and sometimes you see Jack Kirby's there or Gil Kane's there or Alex Toth, and you got a chance to meet them, like I'm
Oh,
talking right now, but you got to keep your fanboy hidden
Oh,
inside,
yeah.
just talk cool to them. But it was like that was really a lot of fun, and they let us have fun with it. It's like they let us take the scripts and plus them, which is what I really like to do. Because someone gets me a script, I want to try and make it fantastic and the best thing possible. And so, yeah, Thundarr was a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah, Roy
You know,
wrote one of those episodes too. He wrote one of the Thundarr episodes. The oh my God, that cartoon, Steve, actually got canceled because it was too violent. Like they wouldn't let it, but it was
yeah,
such
violent. Yeah, it's
yeah,
violent. It's like, yeah, it's
it was
yeah.
so good. Go ahead, Steve. Poor Steve's been taking this in. Give little Steve something. Give Mr. Houston something.
You know, it's funny. I don't think you were aware of it, but what you said in the little segment there when you were talking about the overall process of the creation of these the X-Men cartoon actually relates very well with what's going on today at Marvel as a whole.
Mhm.
And the way you explained it about being someone that has the knowledge, someone who has a knowledge of the source material and can make corrections, like a super editor. Now, you may not be aware of this. I doubt that you are. But right now, over at Marvel, there are a lot of books coming out that seem to be written by some people that have no idea what's going on. So without, you know, you would have had that little scene where Storm's spinning, you know, and you went in there and did a little line. Right now, over at Marvel, we have a load of people who are working over there who don't know the source material.
Yeah.
And there are no editors left anymore that actually know it either. So stuff is going through and sales are coming down and everyone's like, well, no one knows. And I would love some executives or people in positions of power to take notice of that little 10-minute area where you're speaking about how you were able to make corrections and create what fans consider the finest cartoon, X-Men cartoon there is. Why? Because you knew your source material and you were able to make corrections and course correct people who are like, well, why didn't we just do no, come here. This is what has to be done. That there is crucial to the actual saving of the entire industry. And I don't even know that you were aware of it.
No, what I wanted to make sure that happened was that there's a reason why the source material is successful. So for me, it's like, just take the source material, put it on the screen. I mean, it's like 101. I mean, don't disrespect it. Don't try and make it into something else that is not. Just take it and put it on the screen. I mean, you have to adapt certain things because you're going from the medium, a printed medium into cinema. And so you do have to make changes, but you only make changes if you have to. You don't make it because you can. And so that was my philosophy in doing the show.
Yeah. So just call me insane. Says so. We just need Larry in charge of it all. What I'm hearing.
You put Larry and Rick Hoberg together. I couldn't imagine the magic you guys can make. I mean, you guys, Batman and Robin, right there. Like, seriously, you guys, literally, you almost as much as Stan, Roy, Jack, Steve, like the John Buscema. Reading those comics for the first time exploded me. But I saw the cartoons first, but then being educated in comics and then actually seeing your cartoons. I mean, you really, the beauty of this podcast, and I said this the same thing to Rick, and who I love to death, and finally he's going to be in a future episode, is that at least we can celebrate you, and I want people to see who the man is who actually brought this to the world. Because your work and Larry Houston is sometimes not one the same, and that's what we try to do and try to show that. And I'm a little eccentric, but I'm just one of them. I'm just one of millions. Steve keeps it in control. Steve's a little cuckoo too. Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, you changed millions of kids, because, like I said, we went into school the next day, like on that Monday morning, and we talked about these things like we talked about the comics, and it was so refreshing. And it all started with Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and you said you worked on the Hulk too. I mean, those were just incredible moments in TV history, and now you're never going to get that because it was so fresh at that time too. You broke, Larry. I just want you to know, and I'm sure you do, but it's an honor for you to be here. That you really touched not just my heart, but millions. Look at Niall. Niall's a freak. Niall's always calm. And Niall's always calm. But
and wait till you get my invite to come on my own personal show. Then we'll truly dive into the weeds, Steve.
Yes.
So in ending, Mr. Houston, Steve, any last words for Larry?
Yeah, as I said, Larry, it's been a real pleasure. It's been very educational for me, and I am gonna have to watch this second series of Fantastic Four. Now I'm curious. I have to. The only thing is that it doesn't exist anymore, but I think I can find it somewhere now.
I have it.
It's on, I think it's on DisneyPlus.
Yeah, but again. I hope that you have an understanding now of the reach and the power that you have without being like a Stan Lee person that's out there saying, look, it's me, I'm doing all this. But literally, in comics, we're talking hundreds of thousands of people.
Right.
With animation, we're talking millions all around the world at the influence and the power. And I just hope and pray that, you have an idea of the gravitas that you have managed to create there. And feel an enormous sense of pride because it really is amazing.
Well, thank you. I since going to the conventions when I retired back in 2016, I started understanding that how big of influence it had because from 1997 until I retired, I actually thought people forgot about the show. But when I went going to the conventions and I started meeting people, that's when I started getting an idea of what kind of impact it made, and it made me very happy that my efforts actually made a difference, and that there are people who got a chance to watch the X-Men with their parents and enjoyed the show at the same time. So it's written on two levels. You on one level it's like explosions and laser beams, but on another level you're writing teenage and above, and so the parent could get into it and the kids could get into it at the same time. And one thing I want to add to you guys, when I was in the 60s, way back when, I was reading a Spiderman book, and on one panel they had Thor going through the panel, and Spiderman say, "Hey, watch where you're throwing that thing," and then at the bottom Stan would write, "If you want to see where the story's going, buy issue Tales to Astonish," whatever it was, right? And it just freaked me out. It's like, oh my God, it's a connected universe.
That's Stan. Stan.
And so I wanted to pay it forward. So when I did my X-Men show, I was throwing cameos here and there of other parts of the universe, but I would only do it if it never interfered with the original story. So if you saw those cameos and you didn't know the mythology, it'd be just like a fire hydrant or a bench. It wouldn't mean anything to you. But if you did, and you saw Deadpool or some other characters, like, oh my God, there's War Machine, there, whatever. And so I wanted to pay it forward to the fans. It's my thank you to them to try and instill that same excitement I had as a little kid and put that into the show. And the first time I tried to do it, the networks kicked it back. It was Spider-Man. They said, no, you can't do cameos. And they never told me why. So the next time I saw a chance, I didn't ask permission. I just put them in, I figured by the time they see it and gets on the air, if they want to fire me, it's too late, But I knew that would work to create enthusiasm and excitement for the show and also pay it forward to the kids.
Well, Larry, let me throw this. You did do a little Easter egg, and Steve, you should hear this one. On one of the X-Men, the early X-Men episodes, when Bishop comes, Niall, you'll remember this. Remember Bishop first shows up in New York, wherever he is, and he's looking at the paper, and two kids run, and they have the new game, The Assassin.
Yeah.
But wait. This is I want to know, as we all know, it was basically the Punisher. It was the Punisher Nintendo game, these two kids. But even I knew at that time, the Assassin was actually the first name that Marvel was going to use for the Punisher. But the kids say Assassin. Now, did you do that on purpose? Or tell me, somebody had to truly know comics to put the Punisher in there and call him the first name that he was called that didn't fly.
That I have to attribute that to the writers. That would have to be Eric Lewald who put that in there. But I made sure that it was, the Punisher.
Right.
And instead of saying marble, it said marbles, like marbles.
Yeah.
We had to get close to it, but we couldn't hit it on the nail on the head. So, but that was more of that wasn't me for that case. That was more of Eric Lewald's writer, and I think his name is Mark Edens.
Now
there's two of them. Yeah.
Right. That's huge because those are people that truly know their stuff. And that's why that cartoon did so well. Now, any last words for Mr. Houston?
Well, first, I want to thank you for coming on. And my buddy Daniel Russell here just had a quick comment. Said, thanks for the cameos. Thanks for caring about the fans. That doesn't happen much anymore. So kudos
at
to you there.
all.
And then one thing I'd like to do, if you don't mind, and I remember seeing this a few years back, and when I knew you were coming on, it clicked back in my brain. But if you don't mind, I'd like to share a post. It was a birthday post for you in 2019 from John Semper Jr., and he nails everything in a nutshell about you guys. Would you mind if I just read that quick?
Sure.
For the audience? So I'm just gonna share this screen here. And I just want to share this because I think it nails it. He says, happy birthday today to the amazing producer, Larry Houston. 25 years ago, well before Hollywood started frantically handing out creative opportunities willy-nilly to people of color in the name of diversity, the top 2 animated shows on Saturday morning television were being run by a couple of black guys. Larry Houston was producing and directing X-Men, and I was the showrunner, producer, and head writer for Spider-Man. We were the first people of color to hold these positions in animation on network TV. And yes, in those pre-YouTube, pre-everybody gets to be on TV days, it was a very big deal. So here's to you, my good friend and my fellow TV pioneer. We did the thing. We kicked ass. And try as they might, they can't ever take that away from us. We're history. Yeah. And that's true. I mean, you guys were very, very successful and accomplished at what you did.
Oh, thank you. We call ourselves we're brothers from a different mother. That kind of, we made that joke between ourselves. And for me, I didn't find this out till maybe about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Floyd Norman is like the first black animator at Disney. He worked on Jungle Book and stuff like that.
He's still around, I believe.
Yeah, he's still around. Yeah. And we went to lunch and he told me, that I broke a glass ceiling. And I had no idea what he's talking about. I said, well, when you got hired at Filmation to work on Sport Billy, there had never been a black guy hired to be a storyboard artist in that position in Hollywood. And so I kind of broke the glass ceiling to become the first black storyboard artist in Hollywood. And I had to go back and ask my friends who were there when I got hired. I didn't know it. And I just got hired on, it was more straight meritocracy. And I had good work. I got hired. Hey, I was happy to have a paycheck, I tell you. But yeah, apparently, yeah. And John had tried to get in there also at the same time I was going to get there, but it didn't work out for his situation. But I got in to work in storyboards. And so, yeah, John and I have been friends since what, 1980? So we've been friends for a long, long time.
Wow.
Yeah, I know he did the Spider-Man animated stuff and all that. That was.
I have an invite out to him to get him on the show.
Yeah, well, definitely. Yeah. Now, Larry, for me, and last words saying that, like, yes, you did great work. You inspired me. You made me. After those Saturday morning cartoons and wrestling, we ran outside and we went crazy on the gravel and on the hills. We played sword fighting. I mean, but because we got to read the comics, but we also got to act it out because we got to see it. Like you get to actually see it, and you brought so much happiness to my life. But most importantly, I almost say this with a little tear in my eye, but you brought some great moments with my daughter. That she's older now. And she doesn't need me as much as I wish she did. She's in college and stuff. But I understand what Niall's talking about in some magical moments that I had with her that we could talk about it, or she would fall asleep to watching the DVDs of the animated X-Men stuff. Like it was just wonderful moments. And you gave me those moments. And this is why I respect you and I love you and I celebrate you, and this is why I'm all cuckoo about you because you get but you seriously gave me that, and this is something that I appreciate because you gave me some great moments with my daughter where we laughed, We cried, we played, and then we played superheroes after too, and all the figures we set up and all that, and she wanted to play it and all that. And I could hear her sometimes in their bedroom, and she would have a million figures because I gave her all the propaganda, but
Right.
I could hear her with Rogue, and I could hear her with Gambit, and I could hear them like having the little relationships going on, and she's kind of mimicking what was on the cartoon. So for that, Mr. Houston, I thank you so much, because that can never be taken away. The moments you gave me with my daughter, that's all that matters to me in life, and you gave me that, and I thank you so much. One of those creators that I truly respect. And
I'm in the middle of it now, John.
What's up?
And I'm starting that journey now with my twins.
and I'm jealous. And jealous.
They're so pissed they can't open these toys. They're so pissed. They helped me set it up, take me out of my little collector room there, and they're like, "So these are toys, Dad?" I'm like, "Yeah." "And you don't want to play with them?" I'm like, "No, not these ones." And Carter looks at me and he's like,
"Well, wait a minute! Didn't you say you bought two? Where are the open ones?"
They have the loose ones.
Oh, okay.
I still have them. They have them.
Yeah, but they want to open those.
Don't look as good as those with all the accessories and everything. And Carter looks at me, and goes, "Man," he calls me bro. He goes, "Man, bro, that's a shame." I'm like, "Well, we're not
what a hard life!
Yeah,
that's a tough life."
So thank you, Mr. Houston. You are a genius, and thank you for bringing us all that happiness, because we love to celebrate you. So, Steve, get us out of here with Mighty Mystic Millionaire.
Boom.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP.